many of us have been doing our work by going into therapy and really kind of talking about the trauma over and over and over every which way. And in the meantime, what's happening is we're actually solidifying that identity because our focus is so much on the trauma.
Welcome to Big Energy. I'm your host, Kassi Underwood, here to give you a dose of that good energy and talk with people who do it best. Each week, I bring you the knowledge we need to be the forces of nature we came here to be. I don't even know where to begin with today's episode because there's just so much wisdom in this interview that I find myself replaying and re-listening to it so I can absorb it. Katherine Woodward Thomas is, I believe, on the cutting edge of relationship work. And she's really always been, it's kind of like her thing is to be on the cutting edge of relationship work. Many of you are probably familiar with the term conscious uncoupling, and she is indeed the originator of the conscious uncoupling process made famous by Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin. I was lucky enough because God and the universe loves me so much that about a year before my divorce, I met Katherine Woodward Thomas through friends, and we became in pretty close contact, seeing each other a few times a month. So that when I actually was going through my divorce, she was there, and I felt so blessed to have her guidance and just her energy. And then, strangely enough, about 6 months after my divorce, my friend started talking about this book called Calling in the One. Literally, people were sending me this book, Calling in the One. It was by none other than Katherine Woodward Thomas. So now I'm like doing her Calling in the One process. I'm seeing her on Zoom on a fairly regular basis and really just being totally transformed by her in a variety of magical and miraculous ways. So I'm super excited to bring her to you in this episode. The way that she talks about relationships and relationship work is so next level. Anybody listening to this podcast, you're probably aware of a certain level of relationship inner work and how to resolve relationship dynamics. You have not heard the stuff that Katherine Woodward Thomas is talking about yet. And in fact, Calling in the One comes out again. It's being re-released this month. So stop, press pause, and go buy a copy right now, and then come back and listen to the rest of the episode, because you're going to want it. As she says, people put this book by their bed and meet the love of their life a few months later. And I can't lie, I met a pretty magical person very shortly after someone sent me this book, like maybe even a week later. So I can't recommend it highly enough. Just to make it official, Katherine Woodward Thomas is the author of the New York Times bestseller Conscious Uncoupling, 5 Steps to Living Happily Even After, which was nominated for a Books for a Better Life award, and the national bestseller Calling in the One, 7 Weeks to Attract the Love of Your Life. She is also a licensed marriage and family therapist and teacher to thousands from all corners of the world in her virtual and in-person learning communities. During this episode, we talk about everything from 12-step recovery to what it's like to get divorced, to the different forms of spirituality and how that can show up in a relationship, the meditator versus the transformational seeker. We talk about what it's like to be in a relationship that's a we-based relationship versus the type of relationship where you're each just going off and doing your own thing. I was truly transformed by this interview, and I hope that you are too. Enjoy the show, you guys. How are you?
Hello. Good. Lovely to see you.
You too. Thank you so much for taking the time for this.
You are so welcome.
I am just so excited to have this conversation with you. My friends are so excited that I'm about to have this conversation with you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. I'm just at your disposal.
When I met you, I just was like, wow, like this is the real deal. You really got something special. And I don't know if that's something that you were born with or that you've cultivated or if it's a combination of both, but I can feel it.
people started sending me Calling in the One. And I'd already bought Conscious Uncoupling, obviously, because I was getting divorced. And what they were saying was like, she's the real deal. And they were talking about your vibration coming through the pages and how there was something more than what was written on the page that was happening, or more than what was being done in the exercises.
Well, the first thing I just want to say is, well, first of all, thank you. I'm really touched by what you're sharing. It means the world to me. My main devotion is to live my life in a way that when I cross to the other side, I feel clean, I feel clear, I feel like I did what I was supposed to do, and I didn't get distracted by the shiny quarters, that I stayed true to what I was here to do. So that's the feeling of real deal. And I know that a lot of us in this community, in this circle, your circle, are leaders and leaders in the making, aspiring leaders. And I just want to validate for everyone the part of you that is pure about that, that is here for love, that is here to be of service, that is really committed to evolving consciousness to the next level. And I just want to give that a big yes and a big sponsorship. It is real. Everything I've done comes from the foundation of when I was 19 years old. I was a fervent devotee of Christianity at the time. Really, I was just a devotee of love and goodness in the world. I did not come from that background. I was a messed up girl and I got thrown out of my family and I was kind of all alone in the world. I went to Bible school because I wanted to study spiritual scripture. And every day for months, I prayed that God would use my life for good, that I would be a force for good in this world. And of course, I had in my 19-year-old brain, I thought that meant that I was going to ride off into the sunset of getting some important position in a church community or something where I was ministering to people. That is not at all what happened. My high school boyfriend married someone else. My best friend turned against us. My parents wouldn't speak to me. I went into poverty. I had like no money for groceries. And somehow, ironically, I also gained 50 pounds. I went right into food addiction, big time, anxiety off the charts. I was really a mess of a girl. And after that was happening for months on end, I finally just decided that life wasn't listening to my prayers, that I was delusional, that I was here to make some kind of a difference for people. I stopped talking to spirit and went into just trying to figure myself out like we all have done, all of us trying to figure ourselves out. And of course, I spent years in a food addiction. I went to 12-step programs. I went to transformational seminars. I went really deep into therapy. I went deep into meditation. I went deep into spirituality for years. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that from the goodness of my heart, I felt I'd recovered from the eating disorder and I wanted to do a thank you to God. So I went down and I was a singer-songwriter, unsuccessful singer-songwriter. And I went down to Skid Row to just work with people who had been down and out. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no training. But just from my own knowing and my own journey, I started working with people and running creative writing workshops that ended up becoming songs because we brought in songwriters to co-write with people about their recovery, people who'd been homeless. And people's lives were transforming so dramatically. And it wasn't until I was sitting in that circle with like 18 men and women who were recovering from homelessness, Kassi, that I realized that God hadn't abandoned me, that going into that desperate period, all of those years, those dark years, was actually answered prayer. Because now I knew from the inside out what it was to actually transform people's lives. And I had whatever that is that you feel, that quality. But I'll also tell you another story that 6 years ago, I got breast cancer. And I found out I had it from a magical way. You don't always get lumps in your breast. You have to pay, yeah, you do not always get, I didn't have a lump. But what happened was I started getting these weird feelings in my breast, almost like an electrical current going down my milk duct, which is like a feeling I have never had before that. I never had it after that. It happened 3 days in a row. I was busy, so I was ignoring it the first 2 days. The last day I said, okay, what? I stopped what I was doing. I went for an emergency mammogram, found out I had cancer, that I tested positive for cancer.
Wow.
And there's when you get the diagnosis, yes, you're positive, yes, you have cancer, you have to wait for a few days sometimes to see the oncologist. So there's this feeling like, I don't know if I have stage 1 or stage 4. There's just this feeling like you've just gone off a cliff and you don't know what's going to happen when you hit the ground.
Yeah.
And you're kind of suspended in midair, and Spirit spoke to my heart and said to me, don't worry, you're not going to die from this. You set this up before you incarnated because it would have been a kind early exit had you never become the woman you've become. But you've chosen love so many thousands of times that this cancer is just going to wash through you, and you'll remember it like a bad case of the hiccups.
Oh my gosh, I have chills.
And that's exactly what happened. And the gift of that was, of course, I never went into fear. I just went right into surrender. Like, okay, now I get to find out what it's like to go through chemo. Now I get to find out what it's like to lose all my hair. Now I get to find out what it's like to lose 11 pounds overnight. Wow. I just let it break my heart open. And it recalibrated everything. It was an integrity reset. A lot of things changed. But I'm saying that because our lives are a work in progress. And every single time we choose love, it's like a brush stroke. It's like we're painting and it's a brush stroke. And we are creating these masterpieces that are our lives. So when you feel that from me, that's what you're feeling, because we bring who we are and all of those choices into the room with us. We don't have to say a thing. And it's a silent power, and it influences everyone and everything.
Wow. That is so amazing. I'm so glad that you told the story of how hard it was for you, and that it wasn't for nothing, that it was actually part of the answered prayer, because I'm a recovered alcoholic and have gone through the 12-step programs, tons of this transformational work, tons of childhood stuff. And I see it as such a gift to have done that work and to continue to do that work. And I think that it's so important for people who are kind of at the beginning of that journey to know that it's really a gift. It's really part of the work, and it really does tap you into something. People can feel it. People can feel that real dealness. You don't have to say anything. They can feel that you've really been there, but not only have you been there, but you've transformed everything.
Yeah, I like to say, even though I'm a marriage family therapist, I think training is great and credentials are helpful, but I came at this from the inside out for sure. And what you feel in the book when you read it, where you feel like there's this other dimension at play, I'll just tell you, because there's also probably some aspiring writers too, or maybe even accomplished ones. But the process of writing that particular book, I really was very diligent about always starting with prayer and lighting a candle and say, what do we have to say today? What is it that you want to write? And once the book got picked up and it was on deadline, I had a lot of writing to do in a very narrow period of time. So I would very often not have done the research on a particular topic, because 49 Days to Love is 49 different topics too. So it's a lot of different things to research. And I would stand in front of my bookshelf and I would just look at the books and say, okay, what are we looking for today, Spirit? Like, we're writing on this topic. What's the best book? And even books I hadn't read, I would pull them up, open them up, and it would be about that topic. That happened over and over and over and over again. So there's this very co-created dynamic. When I was in the depths of food addiction, because you have to let the lion out of the cage 3 times a day, one of the prayers that I had when I was writing Calling in the One is that it be like the 12 and 12, because I would just open the 12 and 12 and I would just feel like all of a sudden the food addiction would just go away. I had exactly what I needed. I was on safe territory. And so that was imprinted in me, and that's what I wanted the book to be like for others.
For anyone who's listening, the 12 and 12 is one of the two main texts in AA. I don't know about
yeah, in OA too. Yeah.
So, and it's 12 steps and 12 traditions. I know that those books were very much divinely inspired, and I can see that in your work as well. One of my friend's questions for you was, how did you put this together so perfectly to create this result?
Look, Calling in the One is about creating magic. If you want to become a doctor, you can pretty much plan that out in a very logical, linear way. You can't plan true love. So there's this element of magic, and magic being basically the co-creativity of life, being able to declare a future, stand for that future, a future that looks unlikely, and start navigating your way to fulfillment of that future. There are elements like synchronicity, then unforeseen moments of support and openings that you never would have thought would have come your way, all of that stuff. And it has a certain magical quality, meaning that sometimes people just buy the book, put it by their bedside, and the phone starts ringing from former love saying, "I'm sorry, please forgive me." You know, I hear these stories all the time. It's about magic. It was written in the spirit of magic. I was an unknown author. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was in my 40s. I was insanely shy. I was like nauseous at the idea of going on a radio interview, and I had this radio tour. I was so beside myself. But things happened that were just insane. I didn't know anything about launching a book, and I certainly had no email list. This was in 2004 that it first came out. But this woman called me a few months before the book came out. She said, "Look, I'm a psychic. My father just died. I have no other family. It's about to be Christmas. I'm really lonely. I'm really scared. And I'm a psychic. And I know that your book is amazing. Even though it hasn't come out yet, it's going to be very successful. Would you be kind enough to give it to me now before it comes out? Because I'm really afraid of the holidays coming and I want something to do." So I just, from generosity, said, "Okay, sure." And I sent it to her. She promised she wouldn't forward it. I trusted her. Months later, she came back to me. She said, "Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you." She was so grateful. She said, I didn't tell you, I'm also an author, and I have this club of authors, and we're trying to crack the code on how you get onto the LA Times bestseller list. Would you let us use your book launch as our guinea pig?"
Oh
said,
my gosh.
"Okay." She said, "You just have to do what I tell you to do." And she told me exactly what to do. And it became a Los Angeles Times bestseller, which then made it into an official national bestseller. So I had that for the rest of the life of the book. So that launch went out as, a national bestseller. People, of course, paid attention to it. So that kind of magic, the book is that.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, it's not at all perfect. I mean, thank you for calling it like this perfect thing. It's not. And in fact, I just rewrote the book. And the new version is coming out in May. Yeah, it's a little scary. But I started working with people with the book, and I learned so much about how, in particular, about the identity that we create in response to how we were cared for as children and what we made that mean about us, not intellectually, but almost like an energy in our bodies that gets re-triggered when we get close to people. Like, I'm not safe to trust someone or depend on them. I'm all alone in this world. No one ever shows up for me. I'm kind of invisible, and no one really cares about my feelings and needs, and my value has to be sourced by giving to others. So we have these stories that are imprinted in our energy and in our patterns, and we call that your love identity, and we actually change it. So I alluded to that in the first version of the book, which is Healing Core Wounds, but I didn't quite have it as fleshed out. So over the years, I worked on that and really got that. Like, how are the source of our experience, how we're enrolling people into the story, how we're interpreting and then responding to life in ways that perpetuate that story and build evidence for it, which creates non-possibility for us, and how to break free, how to actually go back and then mentor yourself to a more true story so that you can align how you show up, even when you're quote unquote triggered, with the deeper truth of your own dignity, your own sovereignty, your own value, your own power, and the possibility that someone else actually could really show up for you when it's challenging and hard and in a way that changes your life forever. But I'm going to leave it to people as they read the new book to see what their feeling is too, because as I said, it was written in that sacred space. I hope the next version is written in sacred space too, that's just infused with a lot more clarity and while keeping the integrity of the first text intact.
Well, everything you just said, I mean, all those stories, I'm like, hey, yeah, totally me. Like, those are my stories, like, in a nutshell. I love deprogramming those past beliefs. I can't wait to see what kind of magic that you're teaching.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a lot of work. It is heavy lifting without relational feedback, and that's why I love working in classes. I know that's why you get people together. We go further together. We go faster together. And sometimes, just talking about the problems in a way, many of us have been doing our work by going into therapy and really kind of talking about the trauma over and over and over, every which way, no stone unturned. And in the meantime, what's happening is we're actually solidifying that identity because our focus is so much on the trauma. And I'm a therapist, so I've been guilty of this myself in service of empathizing with people. We sometimes join with their story a bit too much. And our job, what I have since learned, I train coaches now, what I've since learned is it's very important to be able to go into the center of the story with someone, but never lose the thread of who they actually are.
Truth.
And never and because basically what we're looking to do is we're all relating to those beliefs as though they're the truth. I'm looking at what's the difference between the traumatized self and the true self, and always holding the true self up is what's accurate about us, that we are powerful, that we are magical.
Yes, I could not agree with you more. I have had a lot of private clients over the years who come to work with me and then they stop working with their therapist of 20 years or 30 years and stuff like that. I love therapy. It saved my life at times. And yet I agree with you. And I see myself doing it too. When I'm not in a professional context where the agreement is that I'm to coach them, it's hard not to go with somebody into their story because that's what's socially acceptable to do.
Well, and what they expect you to do, because therapy has trained us all.
Yeah.
And so you have to hit the right tone that you really empathize, you're with them. And it's a very delicate thing to say, now what's really true? And if you could talk to that 3-year-old, how old is that part of you that made that decision? Let's see if we can talk to her and make another decision.
Ooh, I love that. I love those questions. That's so good. We were talking, it was a couple of months ago, and you said that what we're really doing is deconstructing victimization. And I was like, bingo, I had never heard of that phrase before, deconstructing victimization. And I wanted to hear more about what that means, first of all, and then go into what does that mean for us in our relationships to deconstruct victimization?
Oh, that's great. Thank you. It's my favorite part of the work. And I think it's a perfect segue from the conversation about the way we've been working. I think that those of us who have gone to therapy for a long time, and I completely agree with you that therapy saved my life. So there is a place for that work. Healing is different than transformation, though.
Yes.
And at some point, we understand healing is something that we might be doing for many years to come, off and on. You had certain things that happened in your childhood that will forever alter you, and we harvest the gifts from those. But that's different from actualizing your potentials and claiming a future for yourself or a present for yourself that looks nothing like the past and was unpredictable from what you've gone through before. That's transformation.
Yes.
So the victimization is that what happens in just looking back is we become so aware of the impact of what happened or didn't happen that we can get stuck in then being victimized by our own consciousness. I go into the low self-esteem or the unworthiness or the fear of being visible. And the reason why I'm like this is because this happened or this didn't happen, and oh, I did it again. Right? We just get kind of stuck in the loop as opposed to claiming a future where I'm visible, where I'm seen, where my needs are met, where I matter, where I'm in the fullness of my power expressing my creative gifts, and kind of modeling off of that possible self of the future. But access to that self is non-victimization. And what non-victimization looks like is, how am I the source of my own invisibility? Yes, my father didn't see me or blah, blah, blah. Yes. Was it painful? Yes. Did it impact me? Yes. But it's actually not what happened 50 years ago with my father. It's what happened 50 minutes ago when I was on that call and I did not speak up because I didn't have the courage to risk someone else being displeased with me. That was me who chose to not speak up, who sourced my safety and comfort. A lot of these things, we kind of understand them, but understanding doesn't mean that we're going to be able to transform them. We have to really step into owning ourselves as the cause of our own life. So when people say things like, well, I can't really stand up for myself because blah, 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 I say, try on the word I won't.
I love it.
Substitute, I won't.
I love it.
I won't stand up for myself because I'm unwilling to risk that someone else might not like it, that someone won't love me. That's me. Because the moment I say, oh, that's me, then now the conversation gets interesting because now I can say, okay, well, that's one way to do it. What's it costing you? Is that something you're interested in? Is paying the cost of your own aliveness, your own creativity, your own power? Is it really worth all your power? Could you survive it if somebody not only was displeased, but even criticized you, God forbid, judged you, maybe even left you? Maybe they were even horrible and did a whole character assassination on you. Could you survive it? Is that risk worth the ownership of your authenticity, your power, your aliveness, your purpose? You put it like that, and all of us go, well, okay. Okay, I'm going to risk it. If I lose a few people along the way, I piss a few people off, I can handle it. It's this integrity with ourselves, and it begins with non-victimization.
If you're a bad bitch who's ready to create a massive shift into abundance and ease around money, I've got good news for you. I officially reopened the doors to my popular program, Money Metaphysics for Maverick Women. It's a 6-month group program where you receive direct guidance from me, live calls, instant access to my 13-module course, Big Money Energy, plus a 2-day in-person retreat and tons of other live support and content. Learn more about the program at KassiUnderwood.com/MMMW. Check it all out now and register at KassiUnderwood.com/MMMW.
It does. And I think that non-victimization and living in the realm of possibility and modeling off a new future, rather than I think what so many of us do, which is modeling off the past.
Well, we're so creative. So in the absence of any commitment to anything other than that, we will duplicate the past because that's what our consciousness is coded with. Right. So when you're standing for a future, what you need to do, and the visioning practices of trying it on, the feeling the future as though it's happening now in your senses, the value of that is to try on the possible self of that future. Mm-hmm. And to begin to identify with that self. And that self is a transformative process because there are things to give up. I talked about my shyness. It took years, actually, to kind of work that kink out. Mm-hmm. The I'm not good enough, or I don't know that I have anything valuable to say. Other people are more valuable than I am. I mean, all of those stories that many of us have. Those of us who actualize our destiny, it's not like we don't have those stories. We just stop organizing around them. We stop compensating for them. We put them
Yeah.
in their rightful place. We understand them as collective stories that we are all aspiring to overcome together. And if I have shyness or I have the feeling that I'm inferior, then I can let my heart break open to compassion for everyone who has that. And I can speak for all of us that we are indeed worthy of a place at the table and that we have come to have a place at the table, that we are valuable people who are worthy of love and respect, even if our mother couldn't love us, even if our father didn't respect us. That's the reclamation of our own sovereignty and autonomy. We are not our parents' children.
Yes, I love this. And, I have to say, like the thought I'm having right now is I'm so grateful that this work exists because I'm not a perfect mother. Knowing the ages 0 through 7 and the impact what happens during that time can have on the rest of our lives, I'm like, thank God, I'm not a perfect mother, and yet this work waits for my son if he wants it. It emancipates me as a parent, not from the responsibility of loving him, but also like we get to take full responsibility for our lives, each one of us.
It's beautiful. And I love that you're bringing that up. It's not about being perfect, but it is about aspiring to be healthy.
Yeah.
I'm a healthy mother. That means when I make mistakes, I'm transparent. I make amends. I model for someone that we're not perfect. It's okay to self-reflect. It's okay to apologize. It brings us closer.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of good parenting. It's not being perfect. It's just being healthy.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to talk about in Conscious Uncoupling, you write about your own experience of consciously uncoupling. What happened was quite simply that you changed over the 10-year course of your marriage. And I really related to that so much. I learned, I changed, I had new information now, and it was really hard to live within that. And so my marriage ended. I chose to end it, and it was really hard and sad, but I also knew that I couldn't thrive as a human being within that context anymore. So that it makes me think, because I still believe so much in love and so much in marriage, how do we go into another marriage knowing that we could grow and change again? When we tend to be transformational focused, we change so dramatically. I go after my transformation, and I know you do too. How do we make those commitments to people knowing that that's what's possible?
Well, I think that for me with Mark, there were so many things that I didn't know. And some of them were what you're talking about, because that's almost a values difference. And I think it's hard for us in relationships with values differences. So, right. So you look now when you're dating, you're looking with a certain recognition. Now I'm looking for someone who is on a similar pathway of growth that's quite rigorous. And there's subtleties about that. It's not that Mark isn't into growth. His growth is a very different trajectory. It's not looking within at all of the motivations or all of the beliefs. His language is more just about he'll meditate for long periods of time. So he's seeking enlightenment in a different way, but they're not necessarily compatible. So when you go and you look now for a new partner, you look for someone who is more compatible with growth and evolution and is working on that already themselves, and not just what they say, but over a while seeing what they do and who they study with and how they manage an argument and whether they can take self-responsibility and apologize and all that kind of stuff. However, the deeper dimensions of what happened between Mark and I think for myself had to do with my own independence that really came from not having anyone there for me when I was a small child. The kind of compensation from the I'm alone. Well, then I'm just going to do everything alone. And so I looked back, and part of my reflection was also seeing, wow, I never, my life was taking off in these grand ways, and the ways that I tried to include him were actually somewhat superficial.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, I didn't really insist, like I was just, are you interested in this? And he'd say, not really. And then I'd just kind of leave it at that. And I'd go off and be really interested and immersed, and then I'd start teaching it. And so the gap could get wider and wider. Had I been myself now in that marriage, I might have sat with him longer to see why he's not interested and to see if he might be interested, because he actually really loved me. So would you be interested in what that means to me? And would you come, and can we share this, and can we find common ground? So that we were really creating a we life. The marriage is just the invitation to create a we-ness. That's all it is. It's not the inherent we-ness. Marriage is not the ceremony. Marriage is just like, okay, you're both in the room and you're both committed. What are you going to create now? And I think in many ways, I recreated my childhood home where I was off on my own, doing my own thing, and it wasn't even really missing for me.
Yeah.
Right. So now how I am with my partner, Michael. First of all, one of the reasons I partnered with Michael is because he's so good at the we conversation, that he just is generative of we-ness, and he just inserts himself into we-ness and family, and in a way that is kind of new to me. So I'm learning from him how to create family and how to create we're together in this. A lot of these things that we have habitual struggles with, they start with a belief and identity, but there's missing development in that identity. We literally don't know how to do certain things. And part of my reflection on what I didn't know how to do with Mark was create we-ness. And I think he didn't know how to do it too. So we didn't actually do it together. Now, that said, we might have ended up choosing to end our marriage anyway, because the purpose of the marriage really is centered around our daughter and doing a lot of healing work. And look, I never forget that my 2 best-selling books came out of my relationship with Mark. That is not a failed relationship for me.
Yeah,
my whole life
great
purpose happened inside of that relationship.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. My chatter mind can say, well, he's not doing spirituality right, or he should be doing this. I'm like, seriously, Katherine, this man launched your life purpose. You think he should be doing anything differently than just sitting there meditating like he wants to? Leave him be.
I'm so moved by that. I really hear that. And the 2 different spiritualities, I really get that because of my past relationships. And you can both be doing spirituality, and before you have a distinction between what different spiritualities are, they can seem like spirituality is spirituality.
Exactly. That was my dating process. Oh, good. He's a meditator like me. We're compatible.
Right. And also, I just resonate so much with the we-ness, not knowing how to create that. Very much what you just described about going off and doing your own thing. That was totally me in my marriage, and my ex-husband's same exact thing. And now I'm in a relationship after getting divorced, and this guy, he was like, you go to bed at a really different time than me, because I would go to bed 5 hours after my husband. And he was like, can we go to bed at the same time? Just like little stuff like that to like bring togetherness into different parts, or taking on each other's things together, not in a codependent way, but in a like, if it's your problem, I'm going to be invested in that as well.
Yeah. Well, see, so let me just even point out a larger context.
Yeah.
To what you're saying.
Yeah.
We're not going to create the marriages that I want to say our mothers had, but you had someone who was my age for your mother. But there's a generation before us, generations that did marriage very differently, that had very different expectations. And this idea of coming together to hold equal power, join forces as equals, is a very new paradigm on planet Earth. It is brand new.
Yes.
And so there's no models. We're forging that. We are pioneering that paradigm. So if you want to think about what it was like for people to travel covered wagon from New York to California with machetes chopping down the weeds, that's us when it comes to couples and partnering. And so we don't necessarily know how to do it, nor do we have the development to do it. There's things that a lot of us know, like how to state I statements, or how to have difficult conversations, how to repair, how to speak up for yourself, to set boundaries, all of this really great learning that's kind of radical for many of us. Certainly it was for me. And if you have any history with going out with narcissists, that kind of thing, then it's going to be for you too. But there's even deeper dimensions that I'm really knee deep in studying right now, which has to do with projections. What are our projections onto others? What do I assume the other person feels about me and about our relationship that I bring with me that gets particularly activated when there's been a disappointment or an upset or a misunderstanding, miscommunication? And what are the projections of someone else onto me that are energetic in nature that I'm just kind of saddled with, that I suddenly start to feel in my body, and then I start acting in ways that validate their story? Because we are so powerful, we actually enroll each other into our own psychodrama stories. Energetically, it's all in the unconscious. So it's great to learn the techniques that are kind of on the surface and allow us to find each other more deeply. But until we actually know what we're setting people up for, if I have a deep feeling of invisibility, it might not even be conscious that I'm not sharing my feelings and needs at all with the other person. I'm completely intuitive about theirs. I'm talking about them all the time. I'm sourcing my safety from disappearing myself, but I'm hurt that they're not seeing my feelings. They should just know my feelings, because I'm kind of psychic about the feelings and needs of others from my wounded self that really developed. Why aren't they being psychic about my feelings and needs? Must be that they don't care. So in a way, we're setting them up to be a player in our story.
Yes.
And they're doing the same on us.
Yes.
And how do we actually wake up together? How do we wake up together out of that trance and actually find each other? Well, and that is, I think, the really interesting work that we want to be doing. So when we're talking about, joining together as couples, I don't think that it's about endlessly healing each other of our core wounds. And I think in a way, it's kind of like a trap, almost like staying in therapy too long. You're going to keep being around that story. Oh, that's your mother wound again. And then I'm suddenly held hostage to like forever try and make up for that unsolvable problem. No, the purpose of our relationships is to soar together, to support each other, to be all that we can be, to wake up to our authentic power and our authentic truth, and to live in partnership according to the vision that we're standing for. It's to build each other up, actually, to believe in each other.
I completely agree. Yes. Amen.
Isn't that exciting? It's exciting.
It's so exciting. It's so much better than childhood wounding conversation.
Endless processing. I am the way I am. I mean, look, it's interesting. I want to know why my partner is the way that he is. Where did you become so stubborn?
Yes.
Was your mother stubborn? We tease each other, and it's really important that we know that imperfection is part of it, and that there's no one person that is everything and totally compatible. And that's why I wanted to say that too, because you grew apart from your husband. I grew apart from my husband. I can point to Mark's differences in his spirituality. And at the same time, Michael has differences, subtle differences in his spirituality, because he's a whole person. He was a whole person before I met him. He had a whole life. He had his own experiences. We're not perfectly compatible either, but I do know how to stay in the conversation now.
Yes.
Even when someone's different.
I love that. Yes.
And be influenced by that.
And be influenced by that. I think that is such an important point, because we can get rigid too.
Even sometimes I look back and I think of Mark and I thought, well, I would have been better off to be influenced, but how masterful he is at just accepting what's so.
Right.
Like that's actually really important foundation too.
Yeah, so powerful.
I know, it's such a juicy conversation. I just send my love to all the women you're working with. I love what you're doing. You guys are just such rock stars. And if I can mentor you or support you in any way, please let me know how.
Thank you, Katherine. I will definitely take you up on that. You are amazing. I'm just
Thank
so
you.
grateful to get to know you and so grateful for this conversation. I will never forget the prayer that you said when my marriage was ending. I was like, how blessed am I that Katherine Woodward Thomas, the author of Conscious Uncoupling, is saying a prayer for me in this moment. I'd known of your work for years, and that prayer just really meant the world to me. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm really touched that it moved you so much. Thank you.
I did. Thank you. So have a beautiful day, and we'll talk really soon.
All right. Lots of
Okay,
love.
thank
everyone.
you so much.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
That was another episode of Big Energy with me, your host, Kassi Underwood. Were you into it? Go ahead and click the subscribe button and leave a review. You can also find me online at KassiUnderwood.com. See you next time. And remember, Money Metaphysics for Maverick Women, my 6-month program, is open for enrollment. Learn more and register at KassiUnderwood.com/MMMW.